Oh, Apple Canyon, you're never gonna stop hearing from me. So I told you I was gonna post a video. I just posted that video asking about the declaration and like what happened at that special meeting because I was under the impression that everything was done. But then the minutes came out and they said that the quorum has not been met yet and it's going to be continued for another 30 days. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like I thought because I was in that meeting. I thought I knew what happened. But what I wanted to do with this video, instead of rehashing and relitigating all those things, let's talk about some other issues that have sort of reared their heads in the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure if you guys were at the board meeting on the 20th, I believe it was. But a new document is, or well, I guess a document, there were amendments recommended for a document that is an ACL document. And why am I being all like loose about talking about this thing? Well, you're gonna understand in a second because I'm about to show you. So what I'm gonna talk about today is the ACL energy policy. And we're gonna talk about the law that makes it and what it is and why am I talking about it? Because again, some of this stuff just doesn't make any sense for like how operations are being handled at Apple Canyon Lake. So what I'm talking about specifically is a governing document. So I'm going to go to governance, governing documents. When I'm here, we notice the way that this page is organized is it's structured in such a way that any documents that set sort of supreme, like the supremacy, come first. So we see that like, these documents include our rules and regulations, board policies, committee procedures, blah, 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 right? Well, we see SECA, we have the Illinois Not-for-Profit Act, we have our articles of incorporation, we have the declaration, we have the bylaws, and we have these other things. Well, down here under additional association documents, we have this energy policy. And you can open it and you can see it here and we can see that it was approved on March 21st, 2020. So really quickly, what I'm going to do is dive into that document really quickly. I want to take a look at it because I want to point out a few things that sort of were brought to my attention during the last board of directors meeting. So anyways, let me just go to the minutes of that board of directors. I'm sorry, this is the agenda narrative. These are the supporting documents. This does not contain the actual minutes, like what was discussed. This is just sort of like information to help sort of make the case with the recommendation, right? So we see that a recommendation was made to the ACL board from the Architecture and Environmental Control Committee. Well, that's weird. I didn't think they actually wrote policies. Oh, that was the job of the ACL Legal Commission. We'll talk about that later. But in here, we see a review, right? July 26, 2021, Governor Pritzker signed this bill into law. There's significant changes to the act that may affect how owners within the association communities approach solar energy. There are changes proposed by legal counsel that are highlighted in yellow, and the changes to a ground array variance, well, that's interesting, are highlighted in blue. And this is actually what got my attention, because I was like, wait a minute, like I read this law, and there is no variances for ground installed solar arrays, right? Like that's not allowed. Like it's not part of the law. It doesn't say anything about ground installation. So that sort of like spurred some of my curiosity. And then again, because like I read these things, I read this letter from Keith Jones, the ACL attorney, that he sent to Mr. Nordley on September 9th. And he continues on. Hello, Sean. Yes, this needs to be updated. I don't know what email was sent that this is responding to. Clearly this is responding to one, but that wasn't included. Hello, Sean. Yes, this needs to be updated to reflect the changes in the Homeowner Energy Policy Statement Act. I'm attaching a revised draft where my changes are highlighted in yellow. The changes I made are as follows, and he kind of goes through. But one statement caught my eye, and it was this last one. He goes, also, it is not clear to me if this energy policy amendment has been recorded. If it was previously recorded, then the preamble section of the attached will need to be revised, and this amendment will need to be renumbered before it is recorded. Well, that's like a procedural thing, right? And again, like a procedural thing is what ended the vote on the declarations. But this is kind of important, right? Because this energy policy is actually an amendment. And this is the energy policy we just saw. I pulled it into Adobe. The energy policy is the first amendment to the declaration, the one that we just ended the vote on, right? Because of procedural issues, right? And we see board approved March 21st, 2020, right? We're in November of 2021, a good amount of time later. One of the first things that this document addresses is that the text of this amendment, which is set forth below, shall become effective upon recordation in the office of the Recorder of Deeds, Joe Daviess County, Illinois. Well, that's great because like this is words on a piece of paper and then the board votes on it, right? Because the board has the power to bring documents and bring our governing documents to legal compliance. If they want to, the board can just vote, and a 2/3 vote of the board can bring any of our governing documents into legal compliance. If that document has provisions that go above what the law would require, well, then that's sort of outside the purview of what the board has the ability to approve. Any of those additional changes would be what will require a vote of the members on this sort of thing. So I raised an issue with this, and I'm not going to go all too deep because we're still trying to figure this all out with Apple Canyon Lake. It's going to be like, again, like I raised the issues with the vote way back in, in April and May, and here we are. We just ended it 2 weeks ago. So it appears that this document has not been recorded. It doesn't only appear that, I asked that in the last meeting. Actually, in the most recent board of directors meeting, I asked our general manager if this document had been recorded with the county, the Office of the Recorder of Deeds, and he said no. Well, this seems like it's not an effective document, right? It actually hasn't been made official. It can't be enforced. I wonder if anyone has actually had solar installations denied because they're out of compliance with this policy that has not been recorded, right? This is one of those things where when you're running any type of business, any type of organization, especially like a common interest community association, you need to do things by the rules. That's why we have the rules, right? Because if this policy was enforced and it wasn't made effective, it can't be enforced, right? Because it's not an effective policy. The board can't just make up things and then say, oh, we're going to fine you like $1 million because we wanted to. If there's a law that says they can, well, then very well they can, but that's not the case here. So let's dive in a little bit more into that consent agenda, right? So we saw that on page 44, that's where it says, there's some changes. Page 45 is where Keith Jones kind of goes in and says, was this like recorded? Because if it wasn't, then like we need to change like the text, right? So I mean, like the board is going to be voting on this on their next meeting. And this is a question. If it hasn't been recorded, well, then the draft version that they've been reviewing isn't actually accurate. And the attorney addresses this right here. If it was previously recorded, then the preamble section of the attached will need to be revised, and this amendment will need to be renumbered before it's recorded. Well, it sounds like the board can't vote on this unless they get those corrections made before the next board of directors meeting. But let's start actually diving into some other things about this, right? Because this policy was actually approved back in 2020, right? March 21st, 2020. Here's the board of directors meeting minutes. And we see down here that here's the energy policy. And we see that Sean noted that, they've discussed these new items in the policy, new language to hire a licensed installer, by the way, that property owners have to pay for. Control over the angle, adding a variance would be needed if it does not match. And Sean Norley indicated that it might be good to have that authority to provide that variance. So it seems that that's actually the language that's in contention. All of these variances that this law currently, or that this policy currently provide, specifically about ground-mounted solar panels, actually it's not justified legally. They don't have permission to actually provide or permit variances under this policy. It's very, very interesting to see like what happened, right? Because we know that we can drive around the lake and we can see ground-based solar systems, right? They're like literally like there's a pole coming out of the ground and then you see the solar panels. How did the association approve that if this policy was never effective? How did they actually decide that mounting those panels on the ground was effective? I additionally raised this question during the last board of directors meeting, and I asked, why was this language about permitting these variances, why was this removed from the updated version? And so we see in those in the consent agenda, the 2021 memos for the board of directors meeting, we see that there's this blue stuff that's been pulled out that speaks to the variances, which ACL wasn't allowed to put in the original document anyways. And then we see this other stuff that the attorney has recommended be pulled out because it's not applicable. So again, I'm curious, has anyone had any solar systems that have been denied by AECC? And if so, well, that's curious because I wonder if AECC actually had the permission to deny deny those applications, knowing that the policy they were using to deny or to base that denial is not an official policy of the association. Furthermore, I have to ask, if this is actually an amendment to our declaration, why isn't it in any of the stuff for like the vote on our declaration? And what I mean by that is like when I click on Town Hall under governance, this is where I see all those draft documents. I see the bylaws and I see the declarations. I don't see the energy policy. More so, when I actually look at this comparison, if I do a quick search, I don't get anything for energy. The draft document of our declarations doesn't even mention this policy that is, well, questionable as to whether it's in effect or not. So anyways, I leave you with that. I've already raised this issue to the board. Hopefully they're looking into it or seeking some sort of advice on how to proceed forwards, because there's some fishy stuff going on. I'm not satisfied that this is a simple oversight. It seems like that this was intentionally put forward to the board for approval, and it seems pretty clear that I'm sorry, this is the bylaws. It seems pretty clear to me, this is not the bylaws, this is the declaration. I'm looking for that policy document that I had open a moment ago. It seems very clear to me that this policy, like there was no authority for the board to actually approve this, and that's why it hasn't been recorded, is because the process wasn't followed and they know it wasn't followed. So I'd like some answer as far as like, why was this policy put in place in March of 2020, and it's never been recorded with the recorder of deeds for the county. I'll leave you guys with that. Thank you all. Stay frosty, my friends. Until next time.